Dylan said it would do me good. A full week, he grinned, placing the brochure next to my tea. They've got mineral baths, massages, everything. You deserve it, Mom. I didn't argue. Not out loud. I packed 2 suitcases, left the lights off, and let him drive me to the bus station. What he didn't know was that Carmen had a friend with a studio across the street from my house, empty, dusty, and with a clear view of my front porch. By 10 p.m., the house lit up like a hotel lobby. Not just Dylan and Noelle. 3 cars arrived. People I didn't know got out laughing, polished, carrying a bottle of wine like they were coming home for the holidays. At 11:48, someone knocked on the studio door. I froze. Then a whisper. Familiar, gravelly. Marcella. It's Langston. I saw you come in earlier. I opened the door a crack. He didn't waste words. At midnight, he said, watch the window. Then he left. I crouched near the edge of the curtains, gripping the armrest. The clock blinked 12:01. Inside my house, Noelle was standing near the living room mantel. In her hand, my red folder. The one from the safe. The one labeled Estate and Deed. Dylan stood beside her, not nervous, not hesitant. A man in a gray suit took the folder from her hands and flipped it open. They all nodded. Toasted. My knees gave. I sat hard on the floor, my living room, my husband's chair, my wedding portrait in the background, and strangers walking past like it meant nothing. They didn't see me, but I saw everything. The papers, the signatures, the way Noelle tilted her head and said something that made them all laugh. They clinked their glasses again. It was the kind of toast people make when a deal is done. I reached for my phone with shaking hands. Not to call, just to document. I needed proof. And I needed time. 2 weeks before I left the back door made a sound it shouldn't have. A soft double click, not the usual clean snap. I remember pausing, keys in my hand, groceries still dangling from my wrist. I jiggled it once, and the bolt caught. I told myself it was humidity. That same afternoon, I found the books on the living room shelf slightly off. Not a lot, just enough for the spine of my late husband's memoir to stick out a 1/4 inch. I pushed it back in place and forgot about it. A few days later, the lid on the tea tin didn't close right. My wedding frame was turned 5 degrees to the left. Not crooked, just not mine. Dylan had a key. So did Noelle. They'd never abused the trust. Not openly. Noelle came by with soup sometimes. Dylan fixed the gutters. There were reasons, always reasons. But now, sitting on a borrowed floor with a phone full of photos I didn't want to look at, the old doubts rushed in like floodwater. I opened my notebook and started listing what I knew should be in the house: the folder, the birth certificates, the deed, the joint account papers. Then I added the small things: my coin box, the handwritten letter from my husband, the watch he'd worn to our anniversary dinner. Before I left for the vacation, I took pictures of everything. Each drawer, each file. I sent them to a new email I created that morning. I didn't even label the folders, just numbers, just in case. I told Carmen where the hard copy was too. Some part of me had already known. I scrolled through the images again and landed on the red folder. It was in the drawer beneath the safe, exactly where I'd left it. That was 12 days ago. Tonight it had been on Noelle's arm, passed like a gift to a stranger. I opened a new note on my phone and typed, "Check bank withdrawals tomorrow." I had the feeling the paper trail wasn't just in my house. The binoculars pressed sharp against my face, but I didn't move. Every night since I arrived, someone new had walked through my front door, some with clipboards, others with sleek leather folders. Not friends, not family. These were professionals. People who shook hands too formally and glanced at crown molding with the same expression a butcher gives a cut of meat. Noelle played host with surprising ease. She wore heels inside, gave little speeches in the hallway. I could see her pointing to the skylight in the den, gesturing at the kitchen, as if she'd installed the counters herself. Once, she even opened my pantry and held it open, like it was part of a showroom. Dylan followed along like a golden retriever, smiling, nodding, laughing at things I couldn't hear. I wrote down license plates, took photos. Even Carmen, who had seen her share of petty thefts and family squabbles, stood behind me one night and whispered, "That's not a tour. That's a transfer." I wanted to believe maybe, just maybe, they were filming something, helping someone else, using the house as a set. But then on Thursday, I saw it again. The red folder. This time, Noelle didn't try to hide it. She set it on the dining room table with a flourish. The same table where I'd eaten my last Christmas dinner with Dylan before he moved out. The man across from her opened the folder, flipped through the documents inside. His tie was pale gray. His pen was gold. He nodded after each page, tapping the corner with his finger like he was memorizing the weight of the paper. Dylan refilled his glass. Noelle laughed. I didn't. I zoomed in on the label Marcella Wynne, original deed. They weren't just preparing for something. They thought it was already theirs. That night, I didn't sleep. I waited for morning to come so I could call Gwen. I needed to know if the house was still mine on paper or only in memory. I waited until just after 7 a.m. to make the call. Carmen had given me a burner phone the week before, saying, "Use this if things get strange." At the time, I thought she was being dramatic. Now I was grateful she'd insisted. Gwen answered on the third ring. Her voice was crisp, alert. "Marcella." "Yes," I said. "It's me. I need to know something, and I need you to check it quietly." I gave her the address, my name, the parcel number, everything I could remember without opening my mouth too wide, afraid it might crack if I spoke too fast. There was a pause as she typed. "The title's active," she said, "but it's been updated recently, 2 weeks ago, according to the digital record." My mouth went dry. Updated how looks like a quit-claim deed was filed. Transfer of interest. From you to Dylan Wynne and Noelle Reese Wynne. "I never signed that," I figured Gwen said, "because the signature looks shaky, but it's notarized. The file includes a stamp from a mobile notary. Looks legit on the surface." It's not. I was home. I never saw anyone. I never signed anything. She took a breath. "Okay. We can file a fraud report with the recorder's office and request an emergency freeze. But Marcella, if they've already scheduled a sale and the buyer is cash ready, they could close before the red flag hits the system." "How fast?" 3 to 5 days. Maybe sooner. I closed my eyes. "Then we don't have time. I'll file it this morning," Gwen said, "and I'll backdate the original deed copy you gave me last year. That gives us leverage." I hung up and sat with my hands in my lap for a long time. It only took one signature, one stranger with a stamp to erase a lifetime of ownership, to turn my home into their stepping stone. I opened my laptop and started printing every photo I had taken. They were going to need more than paper to prove this was theirs. The maroon recipe book had sat untouched in the bottom of my travel bag, tucked beneath layers of folded towels and old receipts. I pulled it out slowly, brushing my thumb over the faded gold lettering on the spine. "Quick meals for quiet days." It was the kind of title my husband used to tease. "Nothing about your meals is quick," he'd say, grinning as he snuck a bite from the pot. I hadn't used the book for cooking in years, but I remembered the dream shortly after he passed. He stood at the edge of the hallway, hand on the doorknob, and said, "Don't sign anything you didn't see me read." When I woke, I made a copy of the deed, took it to Gwen's office, had it notarized again, just in case. I slipped the page from the envelope taped inside the back cover. The seal was clear, my signature calm and even. Gwen's office name stamped in the corner. I pressed the paper flat against the table and dialed Carmen. She arrived within 15 minutes with her scanner and laptop. No questions, no small talk. We worked in silence, the whir of the machine the only sound in the room. When the scan was done, she handed me the flash drive. Want me to send it? I nodded. She emailed it directly to Gwen from her account, with a subject line that read, Verified Original Copy, M. Win Property. Gwen responded within 20 minutes received. This strengthens our claim. Don't give them reason to panic yet. I stared at the screen until the message blurred. Carmen placed her hand gently over mine. They won't get away with it. I didn't answer. Not because I doubted her, but because I wasn't sure what getting away meant anymore. I folded the cookbook closed and placed it back in my bag. Not because I needed it, but because something about hiding it again made me feel like the fight wasn't over. I opened my bank app next. If they'd gone after the house, what else had they touched? The call came around noon. Dylan's name lit up the burner phone like it belonged there. I waited 3 rings before answering, trying to soften my voice. Hi, sweetheart. Hey, Mom, he said, chipper. How's the massage package treating you? I hesitated. Peaceful. Good. You deserve it. The house feels quiet without you. Quiet. That word lingered. He kept the conversation light. Weather food, some story about Noelle slipping while vacuuming. I listened, nodded, gave him nothing he could read too deeply. Then she joined the call. Her voice all sugar. Marcella, we've been spring cleaning. You're going to come home to a spotless place. Very kind of you, I said. They sounded relaxed, like people with nothing to hide, or like people who thought they'd already won. That evening, I sat in the dark with Carmen, the binoculars cold in my hands. The lights were low inside my house candles flickering. Noelle wore a pale dress. Dylan poured champagne into 4 flutes. There was a cake on the table. Chocolate with cherries. My husband's favorite. Carmen's breath caught. Isn't that? I nodded. The silver platter it sat on had been a wedding gift. I hadn't seen it used since the year before Dylan moved out. They lit candles. Everyone clapped. Someone said something, and Dylan laughed. Shoulders loose, head back the way he used to as a boy, when I surprised him with tickets to a ball game. No one called me. No one said my name. I watched them raise their glasses and toast. The man in the gray suit from before was there again, smiling, like he already owned the place. I stayed at the window long after the candles were blown out. The party moved into the living room. Someone played music. The laughter didn't stop. I put the binoculars down and reached for my notebook. Tomorrow, I would check every transaction, every shared account. Because if they were this comfortable in my home, I had to assume they'd already started making it theirs. Carmen was the one who spotted it first. She came by with soup and sat beside me as I scrolled through my online banking history. I hadn't looked at it in days, maybe, because part of me already knew I wouldn't like what I saw. There, she said, pointing. That one. A check, digitally signed. From the joint account Dylan had helped me set up years ago back when I had surgery, and he insisted on making things easier. Amount $2,800. Memo medical bills. I blinked. I haven't been to a doctor in 6 months. Carmen leaned in. Click the image. The signature was mine. Or close. The first letter curved too sharply. The last letter of my surname had a tail I never wrote, but someone had practiced. There was another check. Same day. 1950. Same memo. Different routing number for deposit. We both stared at the screen. I called Gwen. Identity theft, she said flatly. You need to report it now, before they drain more. She walked me through the process while Carmen took notes. We submitted a fraud claim through the bank portal, flagged the account, and requested a temporary freeze. Gwen asked me to forward the check images. Later that evening, Gwen called back. They were deposited into Noelle's account, she said. Personal, not joint. Both of them. I let out a laugh, sharp and humorless. She didn't even bother to hide it. They never do until it's too late, Gwen said. We'll submit this to the fraud investigator tomorrow. But Marcella, this gives us leverage. Carmen squeezed my arm. And you still bring her birthday cards? I didn't answer. I just stared at the screen, at the numbers, the lies written in my own name, the effort it must have taken to rehearse that signature. The soup went cold beside us. The living room lights across the street stayed on late again. They had money now. I needed to find out what else they planned to buy. The message came at 9:12 a.m., hidden between a spam email and a newsletter I didn't remember signing up for. Confirming your property will be vacant for tomorrow's open house. 12:04 p.m. Staging is not required. Please ensure all personal items are removed or secured. I read it twice. Then again. They weren't just pretending anymore. They had scheduled a showing with strangers. In my house. Without a whisper of permission. I forwarded the message to Gwen with the subject line, "They've moved forward." She called me back within an hour. "The injunction's ready," she said. "I'll file it before noon and email you the PDF with the county timestamp. It's valid for 30 days and bars any sale transfer or showings without your written consent. And if they ignore it, then they'll be in violation. That changes everything." I thanked her, hung up and opened the file when it arrived. I printed 2 copies. One for myself, one for whoever dared to show my home like it was for sale. Then I wrote a short note to the real estate agent. Calm, formal, just enough to remind them whose name was still on the title. This property is currently under legal restriction. Any unauthorized showing will be considered a breach. Attached is the active injunction filed and stamped by the county. I folded the documents into a manila envelope and slid it into my bag. Carmen sat across from me, watching. "If something happens," I said, "and I can't get to the door, just hand them this." She nodded once. "You'll be there." That night, I didn't sleep. I sat near the window lights off phone, fully charged. My notebook open beside me with names, dates, details. Every dinner, every lie, every glass raised in the house I still called mine. By morning, I had picked out the clothes I'd wear. Not to impress them, but to remind them who they'd forgotten. The driveway was already full when I arrived. A black SUV, a silver sedan, a small white coupe parked half onto the grass like they owned the lawn. I stepped over the curb and adjusted the strap of my bag, the envelope warm from where it had rested against my palm. Inside, I could hear voices, low, polite, curious. The kind of voices people use when they're imagining throwing parties in someone else's kitchen. I didn't knock. I opened the front door with my own key and stepped into the house like I still belonged, because I did. The conversation stopped. The man in the gray blazer who had been gesturing toward the fireplace turned mid-sentence. The couple beside him stiffened. Noelle was at the end of the hallway holding a tray of wine glasses. Dylan stood behind her clipboard in hand. His face drained of color when he saw me. Noelle blinked, then smiled too quickly. "Why are you back?" I didn't answer. I walked to the agent. He was young, confused, holding a tablet, and handed him the envelope. He opened it, read one line, then another. His eyes darted to the county stamp. I'm sorry," he stammered. "I didn't know this wasn't disclosed." He turned to Dylan, who had lost the ability to speak. "I can't be here," the agent said, voice barely above a whisper. He handed the envelope back, gathered his things, and turned to the couple. "We need to go." Noelle's smile disappeared. "You planned this." I met her eyes. "And you didn't?" She didn't respond. Dylan moved toward me, then stopped himself. His fingers twitched at his side. I recognized that twitch. It was the same one he used to have when he was about to lie. But this time, I didn't wait for it. I walked past the dining room, the mantel, the tray of champagne still half full. I opened the kitchen drawer and reached for the spare notebook. It was right where I left it. Still mine. The locksmith arrived just after sunrise. I didn't tell Dylan or Noelle. I didn't warn anyone. The man worked quickly, respectfully. He didn't ask questions and I didn't offer answers. By the time the sun cleared the roofline, every lock in the house was new. I made 2 keys, one for me, one for Carmen. No spare. Then I called the bank, spoke to 3 departments, canceled the joint account, flagged every transaction tied to my old signature. I authorized a new password system. When the manager asked if I wanted to keep Dylan on as a secondary, I said no. Immediate removal, I told her. Effective now. I pulled the will out from the safe, not the folder they'd stolen, but the one they didn't know existed, kept in the lining of my old jewelry box. I crossed out Dylan's name in black ink and placed it on Gwen's desk that afternoon. She filed the fraud report before I left the office. No promises, she said. But there's a case here, stronger than most. I didn't need promises. I just needed air. That evening, Carmen came by with tea. She let herself in using the new key and sat beside me on the porch. We didn't speak for a while. The crickets did most of the talking. Then she looked at me and said, "They tried to sell your life." I sipped the tea, still hot in my hands. "They tried," I said. That's past tense. Inside, the house was quiet. My wedding photo sat on the shelf again, turned just the way I liked it. The pantry door was closed, the table bare. No papers, no strangers, no laughter that didn't belong to me. Tomorrow, I'd start packing the old boxes in the attic. Maybe not to leave, but to clear space. There were things worth making room for again.